Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about the SnappyTable Lightning Web Component. This video is going to act as the setup and configuration guide, but first let me just give you a brief introduction as to what SnappyTable is. SnappyTable is a Lightning Web Component. It is currently available on the Salesforce AppExchange, and it is a component that can plug into your Salesforce org in various places. So you can use this in flows. You can use this for Lightning home pages, Lightning record pages, Lightning app pages. This will even work out of the box on your digital experience cloud sites. So basically, you could put this just about anywhere you'd want it. And once you drop it in, as you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, it'll create a table. Um, it will allow you to sort and filter data. It can have a default sort. It can have default filtering. We'll get into all that in a little bit. Users are able to override and click things around and change things in how they want. And sort as well as filter. Here's the filter. Depending on how you have it configured, they're allowed to do various things on click. You can see I'm on a console app right now. You don't need to have console. This will work without console as well. If you do have console, there's some additional navigation features that are available to you. So when the user clicks on a record, you can have open in subtab, which is something that's not available for non-console. But that's basically it. You can customize just about everything out of the box, including all of the labels and stuff like that. Every button hover over can also be customized. These can also come from Salesforce labels. So you can, if you're supporting internationally with users who have multiple localizations, you're able to support that as well. Um, it does have editing features, so you can actually have like an inline edit where the user will click on a row, it'll change to a bunch of controls. They can make their edits and click save. And it also has a full edit mode where every row becomes a set of controls. And there's a special style that you can apply to that and make it look like a spreadsheet. It's pretty cool. Supports up to 50 million records. It supports dependent pick lists and controlling pick lists. It supports multiple record types. It'll also default to the record type for the user who's running it. So if you're inserting a new record, it'll pick up on the right record type. And if you have record type as one of the components here, controls, it will default to the right record type. If record type controls various pick lists on your form, it will also select the appropriate pick list entries for selection for the users. And then if you change the record type, if they have multiple record types that they're allowed, if they change that record type, the pick list will also rebind as well. So it's pretty powerful. So yeah, that's that. And let's get started with how to set this up. So setting up is pretty quick and easy. On the right hand side, I already have my Lightning App Builder open. So once the app is installed, in the components box here, you can just start searching for Snappy. All of our controls will be Snappy here. Or you can search for table, and we're just going to drag it out on the stage. Now it's pretty small, so it's kind of hard to see here because I'm doing side by side. But the only two things that are required for this to start rendering within the Lightning App Builder are Object API name and table view fields. So Object API name is pretty apparent. If you have something like contact, um, then it's going to go to the contact object, and the fields are going to be the API names of all the fields that you are using for your, however you want to make this display. So let's say you wanted to start with like phone, email, name, let's do account.name, so you can actually do your lookup and pull the name from account ID here. So, like standard fields, standard lookup fields, account ID, take off ID, and, just add the dot syntax to access the account.name. And let's do owner.name too. Same thing. And you'll see here that the table is already rendering. We have data over here. So if that's it, nothing more, if I just save it like that, and I'll refresh this page here, here is our table. This is what it looks like out of the box. There's no sorting applied, there's no filtering applied by default. It's just all the data is here. It also by default jumps to 50 per page, and we'll separate the pages out. You can jump around, next page, previous page, all that functions. Um, so that's that out of the box. Now, okay, so before we continue and go down each of these in turn, there are a lot of setup options. It does look overwhelming. A couple things we're going to say about them is number one, a lot of them are the various labels that are on the page. So out of the box, you don't really probably need to modify them until you get a specific request to do so. Or if you're going to have to support localization efforts through multiple languages, in which case you'll want to use the Salesforce labels. But a lot of them are pretty much, we're going to skip over quite a few of them as we go through them. You'll see we're just going to cover briefly and then we'll move on. We're going to jump to the bottom here right now just to go over CSS Masterclass because this is going to come up quite a bit as we go through the various setup configuration options where we might want to apply a specific style here. So CSS Masterclass basically is the styling for the table, and you can add these in as you go through. So as you're going through things, you can just keep adding various um, features, I guess, by just typing them in here. Like if I said colorize, it's not going to really show here yet, but when I get to it, it will show up later. So Snappy is the default styling for the whole table. It's the one that comes out of the box. We might provide additional ones in the future, but for now, that's the one that you're just going to be the default. Medium, this is referring to the font size. So it's basically the default font size. You can do small, medium, and large. So if I switch this to large and hit save, and I refresh over here, you will see that now the text is quite a bit bigger, icons are bigger, everything's bigger. So if you have a limited amount of space or you're doing something with a digital experience site, maybe you don't have that much data, you want it to take up some more space, you want it to be a little bit more padded, this is a nice way to go about that. Conversely, if you also wanted to fit more data on the page, you're allowed to do that as well with small, and you'll see it's just a little bit smaller than the normal medium is. So we'll go back to medium for now. Something else that I did not point out is that all of our help texts, all of our fields have help texts. So as you're going through things, you don't necessarily have to jump out to come to this video, or you have to go to the setup guide, which will be linked in the description again below. But each one of these basically has text defining what it does and telling you how to use it. So just in case it is there for you. Next, table icons. Table icons, there are two sets that are included in the box. Phosphor Duotone, which is the default. And then there's also Feather. And you can also do None. None would actually take all the icons out and make the buttons just text only. So if I switch to Feather here, now you'll see a different set of icons that are going to show up. This will become more apparent as you include more buttons. As we configure things, you're going to see there'll be some additional buttons that'll appear as we go. And again, None will take the buttons, the icons away from all buttons, and even the loading gear icons go away. It's just text only. So if you really hate the icons, you can get rid of them. We're going to go back to Phosphor again, just to keep it on the default. Next, image color. Image color can be any hex, which starts with the pound sign, the sharp sign, or RGB. RGB is also supported, so for hex, let's just say we want to do really, really bright green here. You can set any color you want, and you'll see the icons. Selection, so when you actually have, if you're in Flow and you're doing selection or multiple selection setups, when they click on a row, there'll be a box that'll appear around the row to show that it's being selected. All of those things can be set to the same color. And as I said, you can also do RGB. So if I wanted to do, let's say 250.00 and save, this should be like a nice red. There it is. So that's image color. So again, you can use anything you want. Now, if you're using a digital experience site, you're going to have to set image color. If you're using, however, your like within Salesforce proper, and you really want to use the themes that you have set up already. Let's say you already have a color set. I have a color set for this console app. So if I set image color from theme to true for the next one, it'll automatically pick up the theme color if it's set, and if the theme color is not set, it will go back and pick up the default org color. So now, as you can see, it's picking up the same green that I'm using for my console app. So that's a pretty cool feature. What this actually means is that if you have a single app page and you put this component on that app page and you have that app page within multiple apps, each of those apps could have their own styling and branding and whatever. And that same page, that same component, will render differently for each user depending on which app they're accessing that page from. So that's a pretty handy dandy thing to have mentioned here. I found it pretty helpful. Next, debug log level. If you're in production, leave this at 0. Period. Full stop. Don't set this. Basically what this is really here for is this is here for us. If there's ever a problem, if you're having some major component problems and you can't get things set up the right way, maybe we don't know exactly what the problem is, but there is a way that we can figure that out. So by setting this up to a higher number from 0, what this basically does is it will log to the JavaScript console in the browser, which I got to this by hitting F12. When the page reloads, you're going to see as it's loading, it's going to just dump a whole bunch of information about what it's doing to the JavaScript console. Specifically, if I wanted only errors, which I would just put number 1 here. But sometimes we might need to figure out exactly what's happening. It might not be throwing an actual error to you. It might really just be something simple that is confusing and we're not really sure why it's throwing out that error. So this might help us to figure that out. We're always happy to jump on a call and kind of help troubleshoot here. So we can always work that together. Again, only do this in a sandbox environment, and generally speaking, just keep it at 0. It's for your own good. Moving on, let me close that. Let's go all the way back up to the top here again. So as I said, a lot of these individual pieces are overridable, right? So starting with number 1, title, we can make this whatever we want. So let's say my contacts, and if I save and refresh over here, now it's going to say my contacts. Now there's a couple of cool things that we want to jump back down to 90 here for CSS classes. There is a couple of additional styles. So there's title inline, which if I save will bring the displaying text up in line with the title text. So if you're really pressed for space, you want to make this as compact as possible, this is something you can do, especially if you have a shorter title. That's a really cool thing you can do. The other thing you could do is title center, which I don't recommend doing them together, but this will center the title and the displaying text into the window. So just something to keep in mind there. A couple of additional styles that you can use at your disposal optionally. Going back up to the top, default table where clause. So what this particular field does is it allows you to set a filter on the table that will always be applied to the table. No matter what a user does, this where clause will always be applied. So for example, if I had a page where record ID, I could say account ID equals record ID. Let's say I'm looking at a bunch of contacts, and I'm looking at it. I put this on an account record page. Record ID can automatically get pulled in, and basically then if I were to this is not a record page, so it's not going to do anything. It's not going to get any values here. But if this was on an account record page, then this just became a contact related list. And again, it's still sortable, filterable, everything that you wanted. So just something to keep in mind there. The other thing you can do with this, you can pass in all sorts of SOQL date functions. So let's say last modified date equals this week, which shouldn't have anything, but let's just see. Or let's say owner ID. So let's say owner ID is current user, right? So I think we had 2009 records. Most of them are mine. So yeah, there's only 2004 records now being shown to me because the other 4 or 5 are not mine. Um, Last modified date could be this quarter, this week, this year, last quarter, last year, etc., etc. So these are automatic. They're always relative to the date of today. Um, Obviously, I've been doing this all this quarter, so I'm just getting the same numbers here, but that's what default table where clause is. No matter what I do now, filtering is not going to give me any additional records. It's not, I'm never going to be able to break out and see the other 5 or 6 records that I shouldn't be seeing right now. Moving on to table order by. So table order by lets you sort however you want, and it'll always apply this at default, but users can override this. So now I'm going to sort by name. You'll see that name is already sorted. The arrow is indicated here that it's sorted. Users are able to click on name again and sort descending and ascending, or click something else. So just keep that in mind. This is overridable by users. Default table where clause is not. I'm going to just go do a couple more. Table maximum records clause. This is kind of something that happened in the past. We're not really using this anymore unless you turn off client-side paging for number 5. I would not recommend turning off client-side paging. I don't think there's any real reason to do so. It helps the page load faster, especially if you start having a lot of records. You're really going to want client-side paging. If client-side paging is set, it's going to ignore this here. But let's just say for brevity, if I set client-side paging to 0, it's just going to bring up a maximum of 100 records, and you can see that here. If you start asking for too many records, you're going to slow down the load of the page. It's going to frustrate your users, and it might even run into Salesforce governor limits depending on how many columns you're trying to pull up into your table. So I wouldn't recommend ever turning this off or just changing this from the default. However, you can set client-side paging to something bigger than 50. So here we can set it to 100. Okay, moving on. Number 10, show table filters. So right now by default, table filters are being shown. You can shut them off. Well, why would I do that? Well, you might not want users to be able to kind of search for things. Maybe they just shouldn't be allowed to. Or maybe you want to have a separate set of filters, which we'll get to in a few minutes as to what those are. Actually, we're getting to them right now. Separate filters you can set as anything that you can set into the column list. So if you wanted like account.name, you can do that. You can also search, let's say, name. And what this is going to do is it's going to draw separate filters away from the table, usually above the table. And the reason here is, let's say you want to control these separately. Maybe you want to put them on the side, which is a style that is available to you. So let's go back down to 90. And let's say side filter. Keep in mind there's a space between each of these class names. But now if I set side filter, you'll see here's the filters on the side. Really cool for experienced sites if you wanted to have that kind of left-hand filter, right-hand data. That's a good way to do it. Also, just something else to note is that you have side filter, SF, and then there's a bunch of numbers that you could use, 20, 33, 20, 25, 33, and 50. So right now we only have 2, so we'll just do 50 here. And you'll see that now they're side by side, 50 meaning 50%. So SF20 will put 5 on a row. SF25 will try to put 4 on a row. 33 will try to put 3 on a row. 50 will try to put 2 on a row. And the reason is, when I say try to, if I, for example, bring out this again, and you have much less space once this is out, that's the only reason I'm doing that, is you'll notice that they automatically rebind to whatever they have space for. They're responsive. So you can see once they get too small, they become just a single 1 per line. Once we have the room for them again, they become 2 per line. I'm going to leave it at SF50, but we're going to come back here and add a couple more filters. So separate filters, something else to note is you don't have to have the data in here for this to function. So for example, I think right now we have, let's just do account, oops, I need a comma, type. Now I don't have account type in the filter, in the table, but here it is. So even if it's not in the proper table itself, it can be used here as a filter. And you're allowed to do that with many things. It's pretty useful that way. So let's get rid of account name. Not sure why that's, must be a little bug keeping me from getting to account type pick list options, but usually that would be working. Um, but yeah, there are many things you can do here. Again, you can still use the dot lookup syntax. You don't necessarily need to. They're there for you when you want them to be. Put table filters back on and move forward. Show table on component start. Let's say you didn't want to have the data load up, but you want the users to maybe interact with the filter first. So you can have that here. You can see the table doesn't load until I start typing something. Once I start typing, the table will come in and load. Even if I clear the filter out, the table will still be there, but at least that initial load is not there. So if you're really looking to improve page load performance, and this is something that's not necessarily used all the time, you can set a couple of separate filters if you wanted to, and the table won't load the data at first. Conversely, if I want to show table on component, but I want to make it so that we're not using separate filters. Let me take these separate filters out. Oops. I can do this. So now I have show table filters is on, show table component start is on, but hide table until filter selection is made is also on. And now we get a table, we get our normal table, our filters are here, but now we get text, please make a selection from the filters above. No data has been loaded until we start typing something. Once we start typing, you'll see that the data will come out. But if we take out the filter, normally speaking, it should go back and take this out and show just the message back again. So let me just refresh this page here. Sometimes it just doesn't fully empty cache and hard reload. Let's try that again. Nope. Okay, so that's a bug we'll have to fix. Okay, moving forward, column widths. So column widths, you can do one of two things. You can either set a number anywhere between 5 and 10. I think you can actually go up a little higher than 10. I don't remember. And you can also set like 5x. So if we do something like this, now keep in mind that the component's always going to take up at least 100% of the width. If it goes a little further, it's going to push out, and that's not a big deal. But in this case, let me just set this back up so that we're not hiding the table until filter selection is made. You can see now we're limiting our columns to a certain width. They're actually cutting off and truncating, right? Because we set them all to 5. But I set account name to 5 too, but why didn't that stick? Well, that didn't stick because, again, we have all this space, so it is going to try to take up the space as much as possible. So if you had a lot more columns and you're trying to limit them, this is how you do it. And if you do 5x means it can't grow. If you do 5, I'll leave the others as 5x for now. You'll see that they can grow, and you'll see here that business phone does grow. This means that it's a minimum of 5. This X means that it's a maximum of 5. So minimum of 5, maximum of 5, maximum of 5, maximum of 5, but it is growing because there was just so much space here. So again, when we get into editing later, especially for edit modes, this really becomes very useful to control how big some of those controls are. You might not need a date field that's taking up so much space. It's just one little date box. So you can make that pretty small. Okay. Clear filters button text. And conversely, clear filters button alt text. There's a lot of these pairs throughout. We're going to touch probably not too much on them as we go through, but they're all basically the same. So if I have a filter here, Clear Filters button comes up, and the text is what's displayed on the button, and the alt text is what's displayed when you hover over the button. You can see there it says Clear Filters. Alt text is used for people who might be somewhat have a disability. If they are using screen reading technology to read the controls to them, they might not be able to see the screen as clearly as others. Alt text is required. Button text is not. So if I take button text out, in fact, if I take this out too, this is going to default back to Clear Filters, even if you save it like this. It'll allow you to save it. But no matter what you do, you're always going to have the alt text. So again, if I come in here and I just give it a bunch of characters to get a filter, you can see my Clear Filters button just as an icon now. And when you hover over it, it's still going to say Clear Filters. No matter what you have here, it's going to happen. But again, these are all here exposed to you for if you have to localize your content. So otherwise, you could probably just leave them how they were and everything would be fine. Okay. We're finally making it into our most important one here, row selection mode. Row selection mode has a lot of options. Two of them are not really useful for Lightning pages. These are really used for flows. So if you had single selection or multiple selection in a flow, basically what it's going to let you do is it's going to let you show, in fact, let's just demo it out right now. Let's go into our here's our flow test. So this is just a regular flow, and basically once it does load up, here we go. I already have a selected row. So if I scroll down here, we will see here's my selected row. If I select a different row, the values are changing. In flow, we're allowed to take selected row ID or selected row IDs, and value is actually coming from DetailView fields, which is down here, number 33. If I put a field name in here, an API name, whatever I put in there is going to pull that value. So it's actually going to go get records, get the value of whichever fields you have here, and populate them into the value. So this is pretty useful. So like if a user makes a selection, not only can you grab in the flow the row ID of the record that they selected, but you can also grab some other value from that row if you wanted to, saving you a little bit of trouble of having to go do a get records and pull the value into a variable. It's just there for you. It happens a fraction of a second after. You can see after I click, it's taking a little bit of time, but it's actually going out and getting that value for you. So pretty useful for you. Similarly, we have multi-select, which does very much the same thing. Again, I have two records that are already selected, and instead of selected row ID, there's actually a variable or a property on the control called selected row IDs, which will return an array or a collection of row IDs that are selected. So there's two here that are selected. Here's one, here's the other. If I select additional rows, because now we're in multiple selection, it allows them, these are still selected, right? I can unselect them by clicking them again. And you can see here that, again, similarly to how we had this before, I'm also pulling name and phone number for each one that I'm selecting. So it's just going to give me a comma delimited list of those back. Do with them as you please. And that is basically the two that are used for flow. So let's go back to our demo page here. So those are the two row selections. None obviously does nothing. So when you click on a row, it's just a table. There's nothing will happen. I can click all I want. Nothing's gonna happen. The next one that we have is detail view. So let's say we have a bunch of records that we want to display additional information when the user clicks it. So maybe we're presenting the user with a list of previous customer interactions. So when they, brief date, time, reason for call, maybe there's a notes field that doesn't really fit well in a table. So when you click on the record, you want to be able to see that. So this is how you can go about doing that. So I'm just I have a bunch here already set. Now, when we come in and select the record, you'll see that I have some additional information that can be displayed for each time I click on a record. Similarly, before we have these view and view details, button text and alt text. So if I just want the eyeball there, I can just do view. Probably in a future enhancement will allow you to get rid of the eyeball, but we've found that users don't necessarily understand that this is something clickable, so we gave them some kind of indication that there's something here to click on. So pretty cool. Let's see what other ones we have here. Yeah, okay. Let's try that instead. Refresh. Just trying to show them, and you can have as many fields as you want here. Fields that are phone numbers will automatically automatically apply a style that will format them. So if you're on a mobile device, or even if you're not, if you have a dialer installed on your computer, clicking that will bring up your phone dialer, or tapping it on your phone will bring up your phone. Similarly to emails will automatically format with a mail to. So if you tap on an email address, it'll bring up your default mail app. So that's all done for you out of the box. Pretty easy. You could change the go back text, and that's detail view. Now, the next thing I want to point out is after number 30, all the way up to 90, most of the rest of these fields, even though they're numbered, we kind of keep them numbered to keep them in order, but they're also labeled as far as what they do. So detail view, detail view, detail view, link to flow. Basically, that means depending on which row selection mode you were using, if you had LinkToFlow, for example, I don't have a flow to show you, but you would put the flow API name here. And what this will do is when you click on a record, it will pass the record ID to the flow here that you choose as record ID. So your flow input would have a record ID on it, input variable, record ID. And basically, that is going to show you for any of these here which ones you might need to fill out, right? So if you're selecting detail view, you're going to want to fill out all the detail view options, link to flow, etc., etc. The only other two that are really important there are InlineEdit and FullEdit. So for InlineEdit and FullEdit, you could fill out all edit. So that means if it's just edit, it's going to apply to both InlineEdit and FullEdit. And if it is InlineEdit only, it'll be marked as such, or FullEdit only, it'll also be marked as such. Those obviously have quite a few more setup options because there are more buttons to handle the editing, saving, deleting, etc. Of all those records. So we'll get to those in a little bit. But before we move on, let's talk about some of the ways that you can navigate. So we actually have LinkToRecord, which will try to URL hack into a record. So it'll open the record. Pretty handy, but if you're using Salesforce proper, I wouldn't recommend using this as much as I would recommend OpenTab or OpenTab console app. OpenTab console app's pretty useful. I'm in a console app, so I'm going to use that. It's the same functionality either way. If you use OpenTab and you're not in console, it'll still work. If I use that now, it'll still work. But let's just say I want to make a list of accountants. And let me see here. Get rid of all this. Okay. So I'm in the console app, and here's my list of accounts. And if I click an account, it's going to open it over here into a tab. And then I also have on here a list of related contacts that'll open up via subtab. So when I click on this, you can see it's coming up in a console subtab. Pretty handy. So that's navigation. And again, if you're not using console, OpenTab will fire off just fine. So this will still function, right? If I click on this, it still opens, and you can see it's very quick to do so. So it's not really a big deal. Users love this kind of functionality because it lets them really get to opening the opening records that they need quickly, without having to wait for the pages to reload and stuff like that. And that is basically all of our main setup options. So the last two that we're going to go through for this is the edit options, edit modes. Um, so as we said before, there are two edit modes, InlineEdit and FullEdit. So I'm just going to save this and we'll come back. Oh, you know what? Let's put this back to contact. It's more exciting. And let's add some additional fields here. Let's save it for now. This is useful to see. Okay, so now we can see instead of an eyeball, we get a little pencil and an edit button. If we click any one of them, you'll see that it automatically switches the row to controls. Name is not editable on contact because name is actually not directly editable. You can edit first name and last name instead. So as such, let me full screen this and make it easier to see. Name does not become editable. And this is true for anything in your profile. If users don't have edit access to a particular field, they won't be allowed to edit that field. But any fields they do have edit access to are editable. Account and owner are lookups, at least the way that they're rendered here in this control. So I can change this to whoever I want, right? So let's say test user. And if I wanted to change the account, I could do that here too. But let's say United, let's go put this guy in Edge Communications or something. And if I save, it'll commit this to memory. If I reset values, you'll see it'll put things back the way they were. Maybe let's say his business phone changed, and now I forgot to add his extension is really long. Instead of 5 characters, it's 6. If I click save, you'll see that's committed. We get a record saved successfully message, and we're all good. What else can we do here? Let's think about that. Maybe we should show off do not call and birth date. And you can see here's how when we click on them again, they become editable. You can choose date. This guy was just born. Actually, he's born tomorrow. I'm just too lazy to change the year right now. And it saves. We can also add pick lists and dependent pick lists. So maybe I should do that now. Let's do that together. I just forget the names of the API names, so let's look up the API names together. So this is a good way to figure out exactly what you're looking for. So let's say I want level. And I want sub-level, because these are controlling and dependent. Okay, now if we save, also let's change this to first name and last name, because that's really what we're editing here. So now when I click on somebody, you can see everything becomes editable. I can select secondary, or I can select primary, and you'll see that this also changed over. I can give this person a birthday. I'll make them born last month or the month before. And you can see that that's pretty quick to save. It's very, very simple to set this up. Again, this respects all of your field level security and CRUD, create, read, edit, and delete, or update and delete rules that you have set up for the profile. You can give this out to multiple users with multiple different profiles, and it'll respect each one in turn. And it will also show them only the records that they're allowed to see. So if you have sharing rules set up and they're not allowed to see certain records, they won't be presented those records to see. So just like the way Salesforce works, this works too. It respects all of your settings. Let's move into the last piece here. Let's go into, before we do that actually, let's do colorize, which I like colorize. You might not be able to see colorize with the theme color because my theme color is such a dark green. So let's make this back to red. And the reason I'm doing that is because you can see that when I say colorize, even the little icons for the pick lists all change. When I'm in the controls, all these colorize changes. If I have a checkbox, the checkbox becomes the color. Pretty cool. Again, if I come back here and change to a different color, let's say let's do 30, 160, 40. Let's see what color that is. It should be some kind of bright green. There we go. Clicking on this, you can see all the changes that everything kind of changes to match the color that we've set for our theme. So pretty handy dandy there. And the last thing we're going to talk about really quickly is grid mode. So when I want to go into grid mode, I am, first of all, going to just go into, change this number 30 to FullEdit. And by changing it to FullEdit, basically instead of one row being selected for editing, you'll see here, all the rows are selected for editing. And this is pretty cool. You can see that this is going to work just like you might want it to. The difference here is there's no save buttons, there's no edit buttons, there's no cancel buttons, right? So if I make a change to a record, when I leave that record, it's automatically going to detect that there was a change and it's going to save it. So the other neat thing about this is you can use the control key and the arrows to move around. And again, if I leave the row, it's going to automatically detect that I made changes to that row and save it. So, control and arrow keys, and let's say I come all the way down to the end here. Now I'm on the last row. If I hit control and down again, it's going to go and page and automatically load up the next page. Pretty handy to get around that way. The other thing that's neat is we have a special style just for this. And that style is called grid. So now I'm going to apply grid. And when I refresh this, we'll see here. Here's our grid. Now this looks more like a spreadsheet, but it's a little bit more compact, right? So if we're going to be playing with this, we can see here, this is a lot easier to navigate, right? It looks more like a spreadsheet than it does anything else. If I make changes, I can still make changes. It'll still. And then now I left the page and I came back and you can see, look, it's I'm still able to control. I haven't used my mouse, right? I'm just using my keyboard to navigate. So it's pretty cool in that sense. Sometimes there's a delay that it doesn't trigger. We're working on that. But for the most part, it does let you navigate pretty quickly, make changes on the fly, and as you make those changes, they're automatically getting saved up to the database to Salesforce so that your records are always going to be saved. You don't have to worry about things. Out of the box, this does support all sorts of validation rules. So if you have required fields, it'll let the user know, hey, something's required, you didn't fill it out. It will let them know a bunch of other let's say if I try to put a date in here, so let's say 11111, right? If I leave the field, it's going to tell me, oh, you don't have that formatted right. But this is not a valid date either, right? So if I try to save this record, it's going to tell me that that's an invalid date. right? It's going to pop up and you let the user know that that did not get saved. Try again. Um, so just the stuff to keep in mind. And now we're going to go back into some of the really configuration options that are available to us. So let's get started with that. Okay, so we're in edit mode already. Let's go through some of the other edit mode configuration options. So starting at 36, we have add record, allow add record. So if I set this to true, and then 37 and 38 are the button configuration options for what the text is going to look like. But now, here's our add new button. This works for both edit modes. So if you allow this and the user also has add access to the object, when they click it, a new row will appear. And when a new row appears, they are able to fill it out. So I think contact has a last name, so that's required. So boom, you can see here it's saying you can't do this. You have to complete your field. So let's just add some stuff here. And then it's asking for an owner. So let's give it to test user today. And that's it. Pretty easy. You can keep adding new if you wanted to. If you don't want to add new, I think there is a cancel button at the end here. Yeah, it won't let me do it. I'll reset values. Should take it out. So that is add new. There is also an option for delete. Number 39, allow delete record. If you set this to true, a delete button will appear at the end of every row when you're in edit modes. So for grid view, it's always going to be there. If you're here and you're using the control keys to select and move around, like right now I'm at the end of the row, if I'm holding control and hit the arrow key, it'll go to the next line. So the delete record is not selectable that way. It is tabbable, so if you tab over to it, you can delete it. So just to keep that in mind. But essentially, what this basically does is it lets you click it and delete the record. Again, if the user does not have delete access to the object, they will not see that button. Also, something very interesting is if you're in inline edit mode, the delete record button will not show until they click on the record to edit it. We did that just to keep it kind of nice and neat instead of having a delete button at the end of every record. We didn't think that was super nice. That might get tweaked in the future. Maybe we'll do something similar to what Salesforce does with like a little drop down arrow that has some options that they can click and then delete, or maybe even potentially some other enhancements we have on the way that I won't talk too much more about now. Instead, let's talk about what we do have. Okay, so that was the add and edit and delete buttons. Now, when you're in edit modes, there's 42 and 43. What these do is 42, add record fields and values. And conversely, 43 is edit record fields and values. Let's say you have a field that's required, or a field that you really want to set a value to, but you don't want the users to edit it. On add, you can set that here. You can do as many as you want. So you can actually do, let's say, my field API name equals my value, comma, my field API name 2 equals my value 2. So even though the user is not able to set those fields up, they're going to be populated when the record is saved as an add or is saved as an edit. So that's what these two fields are for. So let's say you had my required field equals new, my required field equals edited, right? So when the record is saved, either being added as a new record, the field will be saved as new, or the field will be saved, the value of the field will be saved as edited. So this enables you to do those kinds of things without having to expose that field to a user and then having them potentially fill things out wrong. It can just be controlled by you in the back end here. Cancel button text and alt text. I'm not going to go too deep into those. Save button text and alt text for inline edit mode, edit button text and alt text for inline edit, reset row button text, and alt text for full edit mode, which is what we're in right now, the help button text, and the alt text. So help I didn't talk about yet, but when you're here and you click on help, it's going to kind of give you, especially in full edit mode, it's going to give you a little brief introduction of how this works. Clicking help again will close it. Basically, it's telling you to, how to navigate. If you want to navigate quickly, you're allowed to use that. You're allowed to tab. You can tab, shift tab, just like you normally would in most other things. Tabbing will actually let you get to these. So if you're doing this by tabbing through, you can actually tab through, and if you wanted to hit space, then you can clear out that, option. You can come into a calendar and hit the space when you're on the calendar icon by tabbing into it, but just hitting Control will let you navigate quicker. So if, tabbing you'll stop at every little possible thing that you can tab to. Control will not. It'll just jump straight over the X's and the calendar icons and the pick lists drop down icons. If you're on Mac, by the way, it's Command Alt instead of just Control. You have to use Command and Alt. Anywho, back to configuration. That brings us to the end of all of the setup options for the individual row selection modes, right? The last things we're going to talk about is some additional things. So we have text to display while loading data. So you'll see before it says loading. You can change that. Record count display text. That's this displaying 1 to 25 of 2010 records. Set here. If I wanted this to be like contacts, right? Because we're looking at contacts. So jump to page 0 of 0 or 0 whatever. That's this here. So again, if I save this here and I refresh, so here's displaying 1 to 25 of 2010 contacts, and jump to page something of something. That's all there. Again, you can even localize those. Previous page, next page text, pretty straightforward stuff. Filter control placeholders. So at the top we have filter, 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 filter. You can just, you can change that to say whatever you want. Filter pick list all options. So for filters, so obviously we have, the ability to change these. If I change this to secondary, it's going to say secondary. Similarly, these do this too, right? So if I say, let's say tertiary, that's great. But generally speaking, there should be an all option here. I'm not sure why it's not showing up at the moment. Oh, there it is. It's just at the top. It's just not showing up properly for me for some reason. Essentially, all would be here. It's just probably a little bug right now. We'll just take care of that after this. But all would be here, and that all value option could, you can change the text of that again to localize. If using paging, scroll to top on page change. So by default, this should be set to true. It doesn't always function. It really does depend on the browser. They keep changing the rules on these things. So essentially, if I have a large enough page, when I come down to the bottom, if I hit next page, it should automatically scroll me back up to the top if this is set up to true. It does continually break. We are continually making updates to it. It is handy when it does work, though, because it will force, especially if you have a long page, you scroll to the end of it, you hit next, it'll automatically scroll you back up to the top, just for consistency. Allow refresh button. So refresh button doesn't really do anything. Like, if I'm clicking refresh button, like I'm the only one in here right now, so if I'm making changes, they're going to get noted to me as I'm doing it. You'll see that the page refresh, though. If you have multiple users working on a queue of something and they all click refresh, they're all taking different items and working on them, clicking refresh will always bring you up to the latest batch of data that you're looking at. Pretty handy. You might not need that. You can actually turn that off. So you can actually shut that off and just say, I don't want to use refresh button. We don't have enough changes to warrant an extra button on the page. And again, you can change the text of that. There is no records to display, so let's say I'm saying business phone, there should be a no records to display text that would show up here. I'm not sure why that's not showing up either. I think a couple of these texts have just been changed this week, so probably something just went wrong in this last iteration. We'll get that fixed up for you as well. Filter required before retrieval. That's the text that says, when you're using that you have to set the filters. You have to filter before the table will allow selection. That's here. That message will be displayed. And that's it. We've hit the end of it. So thank you for watching. We hope you have a wonderful time using this component. We think it's really powerful. It can do quite a lot. And if you have any questions, concerns, comments, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help you set this up and get this running in your org, or we're happy to make enhancements. If you need something that it doesn't do already, we're thrilled to make those changes for you. So thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.